Hi, welcome back for Module 7.3. This is Document and Content Management. So we briefly spoke about data warehouses when we've spoken about the importance of information. The thing with data warehouses is it's all structured data. When we get into document and content management, we're getting a little bit more into unstructured data, whereby documents are text documents. They could be legal documents or even images for health, like x-rays or MRI scans. So it's important to understand that the storage and retrieval of this type of information is a little bit different. And we're just going to touch upon this, and I'm going to tell you a couple of companies that you can actually take a look at that have some great demos and understand what document and content management is. But today, we still have a lot of paper. If you're in a legal office, it's all paper. And even in a healthcare office, you still have a lot of paper. Everyone wants to talk about the green society. However, since the advent of the computer, an archaeologist and sociologist had done some research, and they actually went to a landfill, and they basically plugged a pipe and pulled out some dirt and so forth to analyze the amount of paper at each layer. And what they had found was, and I think this was done around 1999, it would be interesting to see if they've done it again, but around 1999, in the 30 years that the computer has really been a major player in business and was supposed to allow us to go to paperless society, the amount of paper that has been used has actually increased fourfold. And the reason for that is obvious, because nowadays it's a lot easier to just print it and figure it out and mark it up and then retype it, print it again. We made one mistake, we'll do it again. And so it's just became a lot easier. But when we do have actual documents that we need to store and save, we've got to figure out what to do with those. So electronic data document management uses technologies to help us do this. It'll help us organize these documents in a way that's somewhat meaningful, either related to other documents, such as revisions, revision 1, revision 1.1, revision 1.2, which then can be related to a particular customer. If you're in an organization like healthcare, you may have a patient and you may want to store all of the documents, all of the notes, all of the images, all together for a particular patient. You may then lump those patients into, let's say, diabetics or asthmatics so that you can have a connection between all of those documents. It's hard to think of anything more pervasive and fundamental to an organization than documents. Everything is all about documents. So what happens is a lot of EDM applications generate value, and they basically do three things. They improve the publishing process, they support the organizational processes, which means the workflow between when a document gets created to who gets to approve it, to who sends it out. And you see this a lot, say, in content management or for website development. It's a little bit easier with that workflow, or in operations management for a claim. I review the claim. I'm going to make up a document that says we're going to do an explanation of benefits, but I may need to have a supervisor review that document first to make sure it meets the company standards. So there is a workflow, and that's usually the organizational process. And the other one is to support communication among people and groups. So if we're producing a document that's basically important on how to use, say, our database system or how to use the telephone, we want that document disseminated on the intranet. That's a form of document management. And then you have the concept of just-in-time printing, publishing, forms processing is increasing in the design philosophy of all three areas. That we have the document and someone can print it when they need it. It has to be available. So technology enables the major restructuring of process and publishing paper documents. That's what we've done. On the next slide, which I'm going to jump to in a few seconds, the traditional process was for high volume, high quality documents. And then we evolve into this more electronic processing where you can have a lot of iterations a lot faster. But the traditional process, you had infrequent long print run, requires storing documents which become obsolete between runs. It could have taken 2-3 months to get something through the pipeline, in which case something may have changed. You can't make the changes as fast as you'd like to. 60% of the total cost of delivering these documents was storing and transportation. Paper is expensive to produce and get from point to point. But documents can be stored electronically, and they can be shipped over a network and printed when needed, if needed at all. And even if it's needed, sometimes may not be printed. So the major benefit from going away from the traditional process is really paper costs and speed of moving the documents from point A to point B. And this is what the chart looks like. In the traditional process, you had the electronic creation and composition, and then we had all of the steps required to physically manifest that document and get it into the hands of the end user. In the re-engineered publishing process, basically we can create electronically, we store electronically, we communicate, and we electronically print. So the printing occurs at the end of the cycle as opposed to after the first step. In content management, which is somewhat similar to document management, just think of it this way. The document management would be the actual document. Content management could be a subset of document management because it's the individual pieces. Think of a letter that has actually 3 pieces to it. One is the heading, 2 is the body, and 3rd might be the press release or the information about the company. There's no reason to reproduce that every time. All you need to do is pull that from a repository. So in our content management system, we may actually have these 3 bits of content that could be joined together to form a document that is ultimately stored. A major reason content has become important is because core management discipline underlying the online business. This is how online businesses run. And the way they do this, a lot of content management stuff is done on the web. You produce a web page, you may have a web article. On the side, you may have some sub-articles. You may have just some information about the company, who the new officers are, or what are the news events. And these are all elements of content management. And XML, as we mentioned before, as a transport mechanism for web services, is a way to get the data and then merge it together quite easily. Content is no longer static, it is active. And therefore, I can create a document on the fly using any 3 or 4 pieces I want, say this is my new document. So to create a content management strategy, companies have to understand the 3 phases. Managing the content creation and acquisition. So we create a piece of content or we acquire content from the outside. That's the first step. That needs to be stored. It probably needs to be approved, may need to be changed, and it needs to be categorized and indexed. The second one is content administration and safeguarding, ensuring that only the right people have access to that content. If other people have access to the content, maybe they shouldn't have access to the content. Doesn't matter. We would say lock them off. This is all about making sure who should have the data has that data. And then the deployment and presentation. This might be the end of the workflow where they put together everything, probably gets approved by some person, and thus we have a new deliverable out in the form of a web page or in the form of a document. The content creation and acquisition has to focus on creating content quality. This usually has a heavy quality component. Usually get some editors or some key graphic designers who will produce this. And these are specialists. They will produce the item the way it's supposed to be produced. To avoid anarchy, these dispersed experts should be directed centrally. There has to be some control. The content management system allows some of that control because they can put versions of their item online that can ultimately then be approved.